Hello everyone, welcome to another GT Sport Daily Race C strategy guide. It's week number 9 and we are taking Group 1 machinery around Circuit De La Sarthe, or better known as Le Mans. So here is the detailed settings for this one. We have 6 laps to get round, fuel at times 2, tyre wear at times 7, and both the racing medium and the racing hard tyre available, which we'll assume both are going to be mandatory because that is definitely the way they seem to be leaning these days. Now, quite refreshing settings for this race. It is a familiar combo, but usually we have tyre wear at times 9 or 10, maybe 11, and fuel at times 5, and only 5 laps to get round. And the unfortunate thing about those settings was that we were kind of shoehorned into only using the one of the modern day LMP hybrids, and that was the Toyota, because it was the only one who could do the race without fuel saving. So with these new settings, fuel only at times 2, it should bring a few more cars into play. Now, we haven't done a flyover of the circuit, we've just taken some nice pictures of some of the famous corners of this legendary track. Finishing up here with a nice shot of the Ford chicane that completes the lap of the circuit. So let's jump on board and look at some footage now, and the first thing that seems apt to take a look at is the pit loss and the fuel. This is the first strategy guide I have done since the update, where obviously the pit stops have been significantly increased in time, a good thing in my opinion. Into the pit lane we come here just before the last 2 chicanes. Now, do be cautious coming into the pit lane. You do have to physically drive this chicane. If you don't brake well before it, you're going to go into that wall. Don't be that driver, don't be the one that everybody's laughing at the end of the race. Once you come around the chicane, the computer will take over. We'll cut to the scene of the pit crew, who you're going to have to stare at for quite a long time, as the car appears to trundle down the pit lane at something akin to around about 20 or 30 miles an hour. Now, we're just about there. After about 25 seconds, the car will appear. Your pit crew will burst into action. There's the car there. Finally, into the pit box we come. It does actually take a little bit longer than a lot of pit stops to eventually get those tyres changed. The stop duration coming in at 7.2 seconds. By the time we exit the pits, we have been in the pit lane for 37 seconds, and this amounts to a rather gigantic 28-second loss in the pits. Now, to cover fuel very quickly, fuel is of no issue. We have not had a fuel limited daily race at sea for a long time now. I know it's not everybody's cup of tea, but I would like to see a fuel limited race. I think it adds an extra dimension to things. But that pit loss now at 28 seconds means that there is lots of scope to find yourself some clear track, and that is going to be the name of the game in this one. Now, before we get into the strategy in depth, a couple of things I wanted to kind of point out in this video is that I made a kind of promise a few months ago that I wasn't happy with the videos just being in at 720p and only at 30 frames per second, and I was planning on upgrading the sort of quality of the videos, but the unfortunate thing is trying to do this style of video on some of the sort of PC video editing suites becomes very, very tiresome. To be perfectly honest with you, I reckon it would take me about 7 or 8 hours compared to the couple of hours it takes me with Share Factory. Just putting things like overlays on and getting them exactly in the video where you want becomes very cumbersome, whereas it's very straightforward with Share Factory. So for the meantime, I'm going to continue to do these videos with Share Factory. I would much rather just spend 2 hours and kind of get the production values and quality much more the way that I want it than put 7-8 hours into it. Quite frankly, I'm quite an efficient person. If there's a way to do something in 2 hours rather than 8 hours, I'm always going to take the 2 hour option. And the other thing I just wanted to kind of cover quickly is that with these longer pit stops, it kind of has a sort of detrimental effect on my videos here, because there is no longer any kind of scope to do anything like a 2-stop. It's always going to be a 1-stop, and it always seems to looks like they're going to be putting in both tyres as being mandatory. So really the strategy now becomes very much the strategy within the strategy. And for this one, the kind of strategy within the strategy, and the main question you'll be asking yourself is how long do those medium tyres last? Now, we've got a 6-lap race here. It is a 3-minute 25 lap, so it is a much longer lap than normal. But we've got the Group 1 cars who are very high on downforce. Tyre wear is only times 7. Can we run those medium tyres for 5 laps and just do a single lap on the hard tyres? Now, we are in the SRT Tomahawk here, Vision Gran Turismo Group 1 car, just to do the testing. It's going to turn out not to be the best car to test. It's definitely not as quick as some of the others out there, but it has little effect when you're kind of working out the strategy. The same thing will apply to every car you use, no matter what. And the answer to the question is, in terms of the medium tyres, can you do 5 laps on the medium tyres? Absolutely, yes you can. We did a bit of a tardy at lap number 4 there on this run, but we were on course to kind of do around about just a few tenths of our personal best on lap number 5. But we are forced to go into the pits here because we are required to run a single lap on the hard tyres. So out on the hard tyres we come now. Do be very cautious into the first chicane there on fresh tyres, whether they're mediums or hard. It's very, very slippy at that point. The hard tyres do feel quite slippy for around about half a lap as well, so that's just something to bear in mind. I always have a little bit of trouble getting the hard tyres warmed up anyway. It's maybe just something to do with my driving style. But through the 4 chicanes here for the 6th and final time of this run here in the SRT Tomahawk, we'll come across the finish line. We'll get a little bit of a look at the finishing time. It's actually a slightly longer race C than we normally get, 21 minutes 6 seconds 0.9. Usually the race C's around about 18 minutes, so it's nice to have something just a little bit longer here. So let's jump on board with another race run. This one we are starting on the hard tyres, and let's see what sort of lap times the hard tyres are capable of in comparison to the mediums. Now, it did actually, as I said a little bit earlier in the video, it seems to take quite a while to get the hard tyre up to any kind of temperature. Maybe, I don't know, probably just wasn't quite hooked up on laps 1 and 2 there, but lap 3 was a very, very solid lap on the hard tyres at 3 minutes 26.1, which was only 9 tenths off the best lap we did on the medium tyres, but unfortunately it's also slower than all 5 of the laps we did on the mediums as well. So it looks like even with the mediums 5 laps old, they're still quicker than a fresh pair of hard tyres, which very much means that the optimal strategy for this one is definitely going to be a one-stop strategy, running 5 laps on the mediums and just a single lap on the hard tyres. So the next thing that's a little bit unusual when using Group 1 is there is a wide variety of different types of car to use. Now generally in the Group 1 races, the modern day hybrid LMP1s are the dominant car. We did a test there in the SRT Tomahawk. I tend to find that quite a competitive car. I thought it would be quite competitive round here, but it turns out I was wrong. So jumping into the Toyota TS050, I jumped straight into this race run here with no preparation whatsoever, no real idea of where the braking points were, but you can immediately see the lap times are significantly quicker, and as we come across the finish line here, we're actually going to go 10 seconds quicker over the race duration than we did in the Tomahawk. And moving on to the Group C cars, I did test one of those. The Group C car in question was the Mazda 787B. I was actually quite surprised with just how competitive this was compared to the Toyota. Maybe around about a second a lap slower, but significantly more difficult to drive, much easier to make mistakes. And on this outlap here, down into the Mills corner, we actually missed our braking point and probably cost ourselves a couple of seconds. But into the last 2 chicanes we're going to come here, we will cross the line a little bit quicker than the Tomahawk, but still around about 7 seconds off the Toyota. So it looks very much to be that the modern day LMP1s, the Toyota TS050, the Porsche 919 and the Audi R18 will be the cars of choice for this one. And what's quite handy is that we can actually use all 3 of them because there is no fuel saving like we normally get on this combination. Now, one other quick thing just to point out is that there is a very strict track limits at Le Mans, and strict has probably been a little bit kind, dodgy would probably be a little bit more suitable. That last penalty we just looked at there through the PlayStation chicane, I have no idea why I got the penalty for that one, but this is something you're going to have to deal with. It can be extremely annoying, and a penalty that if you have to serve it down the Mills straight can be particularly costly, so just keep that in mind and try and avoid track limit penalties the best you can. So we have reached that point in the video where we put all the information that we've garnered from the previous parts of the video up on the screen and we talk about the strategy. Now, as I mentioned earlier on in the video, DLSC very much from now on is just going to be one-stop strategies. When we have both tyres that are mandatory, the pit stop loss is far too long to ever make anything other than a one-stop strategy possible, with the races only being 20 minutes long. Now that Doesn't mean there is no strategy whatsoever. In this one, we've tested the tyres. The medium tyres are capable of doing the 5 laps pretty comfortably and still being quicker than the hard tyres, even when they're 5 laps old. So the optimal strategy for this one is definitely to run 5 laps in the mediums and just a single lap on the hard tyres. Now, the absolute optimal strategy, if you can make it work, would be to start on the hard tyres and pit at the end of lap 1 and lose the least amount of time possible while the field kind of fights with each other and doesn't quite manage to run at its optimal pace. Change onto the mediums, get some clean air and run 5 laps to the end, jumping everybody as they make their pit stops later on. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to always do that strategy. If you find yourself squabbling within a pack of cars and running maybe 3 seconds off the pace, then I would certainly be looking to maybe sort of do 2 laps in the hard tyres and just try and get out the traffic. At the end of the day, the absolute best strategy is always the one that allows you to run the most laps in your actual optimal pace, or kind of close to your actual pace, rather than running at somebody else's pace or having your pace compromised by people overtaking you, slipstreaming you, battling with you, etc, etc, etc. So do not just go into this race thinking you must do 5 laps in the medium tyres and just 1 lap on the hard tyres. Appraise the situation, appraise the circumstances, how the race is working out. You sort of have a rough idea of what kind of lap time you should be doing. You find yourself going 3-4 seconds slower than that, then I would be looking to try and mix things up. Like, at the end of the day, doing 3 laps in the hards and 3 laps in the mediums and splitting it down the middle is not going to be massively slower than the optimal strategy. But I am quite looking forward to this one. I do quite like Le Mans in Group 1. I'm much happier with the settings that we've got in this one. Now we have to make a pit stop. It should bring a few more cars into play as well, rather than just being a one-make Toyota TS050, because it was the only car that could run the distance on the fuel. So hopefully there's been some helpful information in there to get you started strategy wise for this one. We're going to finish off the video with a lap guide in a Toyota TS050. We've got the brake balance at +3. This was the fastest lap that we did out of the 3 cars that we tested, and we're coming into Dunlop curve here before we sort of brake for the first chicane. So there's 3 total boards there on the right hand side of the track. The sort of first one is your reference. Be careful of the track limits through that chicane there. As I sort of pointed out earlier, it's very easy for them to catch you out. You have to brake a little bit earlier for this left-hander than you might think, hugging that curb as much as you can. Get the line right, you should be full throttle on the way down here to Tetra Rouge. The overhead advertising board is your reference point here as you come into Tetra Rouge. Do not run wide, you will pick up a half-second penalty, and that is us on to the Mazda straight on the run down to the first chicane, which I believe is called the PlayStation chicane. So this is where you can actually relax a little bit, slipstream, kind of get your thoughts together. How's the race going? It can get a little bit boring at times going down these straights, but which is a bit crazy to say given you're doing 200 miles an hour. There's a marshal post, the sort of barrier kind of kinks in at the left hand side. That's kind of reference point that I use for braking for the first chicane. Be careful with the track limits there, lots of trail braking in, sort of good corners to sort of perfect your trail braking technique. On to the second straight now, on the run down to the Michelin chicane. Now there's some blue boards on the right hand side here. The last one is usually what I use as my reference board. But sort of braking maybe just a little bit before that. Again, just use the practice, the time trial, or do some custom races just to get your braking points right for these big stopping zones. It's very easy to get wrong and rear end another car, but at least you won't pick up a penalty at the moment for doing that. You'll just ruin somebody's race. And we're on to another long straight down towards Milzan corner itself. I use the curb on the right hand side as my reference point, maybe braking just before that if I'm in the slipstream. It's very easy to lose the back end of the Toyota down into Milzan corner. If you have the brake balance all the way at +5, it becomes very sketchy under the rear for braking for that corner. That's why I'm running at +3. And now we're on another long straight, and I believe we're running down towards Indianapolis corner. There's a very, very tough corner here. There is a green patch to the left hand side. This is my reference. I come off the throttle, throw the car in, keep it tight there to the right hand curb, down into second gear, clip that curb there. Don't run wide, you can pick up a very silly penalty for that. A very tricky corner here of Arnage, very difficult to pick out a braking point for this one. And once again we're on to another long straight as we head towards the Porsche curves. So in my opinion, we are heading towards the best part of the track, that is the posterior curves and then the 2 chicanes at the end. Lots of time that can be made up in this part of the track as well. You're looking for a dark patch of green towards the sort of left hand side of the track there. That's my reference point as we throw the car in to the posterior curves in 5th gear. It's mostly full throttle, just a slight little lift, then down into 4th gear for the right hand one. Hug that curb and the track as you try and find the perfect turn-in point here for the left-hander. Don't run wide there, you will pick up a silly half-second penalty. Very, very easy to do. And where the sort of V of the pit lane and the track here kind of converges, that's your kind of reference point. Braking for the first chicane, down into 2nd gear for the second one, using lots and lots of curb, but don't use too much or you will pick up a penalty. But that is a lap of Circuit De La Sarthe Le Mans in the Toyota TS050. Now I'm very much looking forward to this one. This is a race I do enjoy. Hopefully it doesn't just become a one make race in the sort of Audi R18 and the Porsche 919. See a little bit of use from people. But if you see me on track, do say hello in the lobbies. I will do my best to reply to you. Look out for a live stream later on in the week. And all that's left to say, if you haven't already, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and I shall see you on the next one. Goodbye now, and thank you.